Joining me now is opinion editor at Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon. You're about to release a new book, Second Class: How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women, which will explore a fascinating political realignment that should hopefully work in the favour of the neglected American working class. It's an issue we've long talked about on this program, but here it's a trend that is evident in the UK, Australia, and certainly in the US, where the affluent are veering very much left and the working and middle class, including many minority groups, are turning to the right. What do you think is behind this phenomenon, this political realignment?
Thank you so much for having me, Rita. It's so great to be here with you and with your audience. Put simply, the Democrats abandoned the working class. So the Democrats used to be the party of labor. And as you put it so eloquently, the left used to be on the side of the working class, of workers, of labor. And that's why they used to, for example, oppose immigration, because mass migration lowers the wages of working class people by increasing the supply of workers, right? It's obvious supply and demand. And as a result, the Democrats used to believe in having a strong border. Now it's Donald Trump who believes in having a strong border. The Democrats used to have the position on abortion, for example, that most Americans had 15 weeks, right? It's very normal in Europe for that to be
Mm.
the length
Mm.
in which you can get an abortion. Now the Democrats believe you should be able to get an abortion into the third trimester, and it's Donald Trump who's running on 15 weeks for abortion, right? The Democrats used to believe in equal opportunity. Now they believe that Dr. King's vision is racist, and it's Donald Trump who's courting Black voters. The Democrats used to be on the side of women and on the side of gay people, and now they are on the side of trans people. And it is Donald Trump who is viewed as being pro gay and protecting women's rights. So, in a way, there's been this realignment, but I would say it's not that minority workers, minority voters are moving to the right. It's that Donald Trump has captured the centrist position on all of these things. And
Mm.
minority voters are very pragmatic. They are very moderate, and they're looking around and understanding, who is the moderate in this race, despite the fact that the media really doesn't want them to realize that.
Well, talking about the media, they have been demented over the past 48 hours because, like you've explained, Donald Trump understands this political realignment very well. Was speaking to auto workers over the weekend who have been incredibly hard done by with Biden's Green New Deal initiatives. Prioritizes EVs, Chinese made cars over American manufacturing. And the workers know that. And so when Donald Trump said there would be bloodbath in the American auto industry, they understood what he was talking about, but the left's trying to paint this as a threat of violence and literal bloodshed in the streets. Tell me about that, and tell me about this Green New Deal, what it means for the American working and middle class.
Absolutely. Yeah, Donald Trump did what he does, which is he gave a solid policy proposal to protect working class jobs and wages. He said if China tries to establish a car factory in Mexico to become part of the USMCA, which is a trade deal that allows cars to come into America from Mexico without tariffs, Trump said we're going to put 100% tariff on each of those cars. It's the kind of policy that has a direct impact on working class jobs and wages, the kind of thing Democrats used to understand. But because they don't do that anymore and don't represent labor, they can't just admit that Trump has taken their policy. So instead, what they do is they invent these outrages to smear him with, to make him seem like an extremist, to hide the fact that this is good policy for the working class. You asked about the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is class warfare against the working class. The climate extremism comes directly from the most over credentialed, elite, rich people who have nothing else to worry about because they have so much money. And what they do is they have created this apocalyptic religion out of climate change. And then they go around flying around in their private jets and demanding sacrifices from the working class, making electricity, gas unaffordable, putting these electric vehicles out there that sit on lots because working class people, A, can't afford them, and B, they drive really far because they live in rural America. What are they going to do with a car that has to be get electricity every 3 hours? I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's really class warfare. They are asking the working class to pay literally for their vanity morals. It is totally appalling. All of the green stuff, like you said, happens in China. The wind turbines imported from China, by the way, slave labor making them in China because that is China's competitive
Mm.
advantage. Slavery, right? Hello. That's imported from China. The EVs now, they're going to start importing them from China. The Green New Deal, getting rid of the Keystone XL pipeline, which was going to have 10,000 union jobs, good union jobs. And all of the green jobs are minimum wage, no benefit, temporary jobs.
You are so right. And we are seeing precisely the same thing happening in Australia. Everything you're talking about, this green religion and how it impacts different groups. We are seeing it right here, and they're seeing it in the UK as well. This isn't limited to the US. Now, you were recently called upon to school Bill Maher, who, despite being very logical and sound on so many issues, he is most certainly affected by a severe case of Trump derangement syndrome. And it leads him to make some really hysterical comments. And you were on his program again recently, and you pointed out that Trump is considered an extremist by the left, but for his supporters and an increasing number of independents and centrists, that's what the polls are telling us, he's entirely sane, reasonable, and moderate. He's very far from the right-wing bogeyman of the left's fever dreams. Why do they have this impression of him and this need to demonize him? Is this the best way to defeat him, perhaps?
I think that's you put your finger on it. They absolutely don't believe they can defeat him at the ballot box, and so they're doing everything they can, including trying to put him in prison. It goes very, very deep. Their contempt for him is an extension of their contempt for the working class. There's nothing that the college educated hate more than the working class. They have this real sneering contempt for them.
Mm.
And Trump, who showed up sort of like the return of the repressed, right? The return of the idea that the working class should have dignity. He's the biggest threat to the emptiness of the expert class and to their moral emptiness, their intellectual emptiness, and the real scam that they pulled on America, where they took an economy that was securing the American dream for working class people, ensuring them a middle class lifestyle, and they created out of that beautiful economy an economy that only works for the top 20%, that only works for the college educated. And if you're working class, you are second class in America. And he exposed that scam where people who are millionaires will sit on, these liberal TV stations and sneer at the working class and then masquerade as the good guys. It's so appalling. And he exposed them. And so they cannot forgive him for it. They will not stop until he's in prison.
Well, that's what they're trying to do. And the political elite seem to have this complete blind spot when it comes to half the country, half of America. If they're worried about Trump, then they're going to be terrified of what comes next, because that voter base is fed up. They're not going to tolerate another rhino Republican in name only. The days of those quislings on the right leading the Republican Party, those days are coming to an end.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think even people on the right in America are a little bit in denial about that. And you saw this with Nikki Haley, for
Mm.
example. The entire Republican donor class was in her corner. She outspent Trump 2-1 because the Republican elites are desperate to get back to the kind of free trade, free market, chamber of commerce, tax cuts version of the party that existed before Trump, in which they also ignored the working class, just like the Democrats. And you're completely right. I mean, the entire voter base for the Republicans is working class now, pretty much. And they are not going to go back to the chamber of commerce. There's one thing that Republican working class people hate more than they hate the Democrats, and it's the Republican Party, because they feel like the Republican Party really pimped them out. And for them, Trump was really a godsend.
Absolutely. And I think obviously economic factors are enormous, as we've discussed, but there's also the values, having this far left identity politics shoved down their throat, shoved down their kids' throat, just dominating the culture. That's, again, something else that the Democrats seem to be blind about, how that's perceived by so many just regular folk. Now, switching tack, you wrote a really powerful piece. I encourage everyone to read it. It was for Spiked. And you were highlighting there that it's not just the working class that are being left behind by the left, but also women who were kidnapped, raped, murdered by Hamas. It was a important piece. Why is that? Why? How can they justify abandoning women who were treated so appallingly, and so much of it was captured on video? We don't even have to imagine what happened to these women. We know.
And is still happening, unfortunately, to some of the women being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. Rita, thank you so much for highlighting this, and for highlighting my piece. It means a lot to me. People really don't want to talk about this. It's really difficult to talk about it. There are sort of two main reasons, I think, that it's become so easy for the left to ignore the plight of these women. The first is, and I'm sure you're seeing this as well in your country, I think feminists have gotten used to being asked to defend rapists, for example, transgender rapists who then demand to be put in a woman's prison, or
Mm.
become regulated to being asked to defend a young man who decides he's a young woman and then demands to play on a women's wrestling team, right? Like the transgender agenda has made feminists get habituated to defending the abuse of women. And so there's almost this natural, they've started to have to question themselves when they're asked to defend women, right? Aren't we supposed to be defending the other side? And the other thing that I think is at play here is, the woke ideology really is a binary. It says we don't distinguish anymore between right versus wrong. We are not allowed to do that. Who are we as white people or as oppressors to say what is right and what is wrong? No, there's only powerful versus powerless. And whoever we decide has less power, they are inherently virtuous. Their powerlessness is virtue. They've lost the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. They see powerlessness as virtue, and they ascribe powerlessness to anyone with darker skin color. So, for example, any person of color has inherent virtue because they are inherently powerless, and any white person is inherently evil because they are seen as powerful.
But Batya, there is a clause there, though. There is an exception, and that is if they're conservative, if the person of colour, whether they're black, brown, is conservative, then all those oppression points are at the window. And I can tell you that personally. Just before you go, you were perhaps woke once, or at the very least left-leaning, left-wing. Can you just tell me quickly what led to your political awakening? What red-pilled you, as the kids say?
I'll tell you the first moment it happened. It wasn't like all at once. It was sort of slowly and then all at once. But the first moment that I had an inkling that there was something wrong with my worldview was when I encountered a 2018 Yale study that found that there was a difference between how white liberals and white conservatives talk to people of color. And this was the difference: when a white liberal encounters a Black person or a Hispanic person, they dumb down their vocabulary, and white conservatives don't do this. And I remember thinking to myself, and we call them the racists. I mean, it's so racist, but I, of course, immediately recognized myself and everyone I knew because that is wokeness in a nutshell. That was what it meant to be on the left. And that was the beginning of my unwokening, as I say.
That's a good beginning. You're right. The bigotry of low expectations, it's very strong among the left, and they're often completely blind to it. But yeah, thank you so much for your time this evening. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Rita.